Hey there, my name is John Whitaker, and I want to welcome you to this free mini course on how to read the Bible and pray. You know, my guess is that you're here because you want to follow Jesus. You're a disciple of Jesus and you want to grow in Him. You want to become like Him. You want to honor Him and please Him with your life, right? Like maybe you're a newer believer and you're like, you know you need to grow and you want to grow. Or maybe you've been a Christian for a long time and you feel stagnant in your relationship with the Lord and you want to grow. Well, this video course is designed to help you do just that. But before we jump straight into that material, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is John Whitaker. I've been a pastor, I've been a Bible college professor, but probably the most significant thing about me is that I'm a husband and I'm a father and I'm a grandfather. I've been married to my lovely wife, Louise, for over 30 years. We had the honor and privilege of raising two wonderful kids, Jeff and Ash, who both now are married and have their own kids with more kids on the way. And so we're loving the grandparent life. But here's the crazy thing about that is my earliest childhood memory happens to be the night that my dad walked out on my mom and left her to raise three little kids all by herself. I was 3.5 years old, and between the time he left, I didn't see him again until I was 7 years old, and from 7 to 18, I only saw my dad 4 or 5 times. And so when I look at my life and I look at my kids and I look at my grandkids and I see my marriage, all I can do is humbly and gratefully thank Jesus for the change He made in my life. That my life is a testimony to the transforming work and the grace and the goodness of Jesus in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And in this video series, I want to really share with you one of the key practices of my life that Jesus used to change my life. Now, in this first video in this series, I want to answer the question of why. Why should we read the Bible and pray regularly? And the reason for that is because discipline without direction is drudgery, as someone once said. And so we don't want to just slip into drudgery. We don't want to just slip into, I got to read my Bible and pray. There needs to be a good reason for it. And what's that reason? So let me set that up for you like this. When Jesus first called His disciples in the book of Mark, Mark tells us very simply and very clearly that Jesus called those disciples, catch this, He called them to be with Him, to be with Him. And it was through the means of being with Him that they were going to become like Him. Witness led to likeness. And that's the way it was then. That's the way it is now. That Jesus, when He calls us to be His disciples, fundamentally and primarily calls us to be with Him. And it's through that vehicle of our relationship with Jesus, being connected with Him, that our life is transformed. You can think of it as a transforming friendship. Jesus is the kind of person who, that as we connect with Him and we do life with Him, that He changes us and we learn from Him and we become increasingly like Him. And that's the whole goal of discipleship. In fact, in John chapter 15, Jesus tells us that being connected to Him, being attached to Him, being with Him is the secret to spiritual growth. It's the secret to being fruitful in our life. It's the fundamental practice of discipleship. John chapter 15 is the night before Jesus was crucified. Jesus knows He's going to die the next day. He's gathered with His disciples in the upper room and they're celebrating the Passover together. It's a holiday meal. They've been together for over 3 years and His disciples know Him, right? Like they really know Him. They've seen Him. They've heard Him talk. They've learned from Him. They've been corrected by Him. And now here they are together in the upper room and they can sense maybe something foreboding and ominous coming, but they don't really know all that means. But Jesus knows. And there with His disciples, Jesus compares Himself to a vine and His disciples to the branches in a grapevine. And this is what Jesus says, John chapter 15, verse 4. He says, abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Every branch in me bears much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. That's the key, the fundamental key, the number one practice of a disciple is abiding in Jesus, of being with Him, staying attached to Him. And notice what He says, every branch in me that abides in me, he bears much fruit. Like, do you want to bear fruit for Jesus? Do you want to honor him with your life? Well, the key to that isn't to focus on bearing fruit. The key to that is to focus on abiding in Jesus, being with him. This is the secret of discipleship. This is why when Jesus called his disciples, he called them to be with him. Take a look at this little graphic. This is just a simple summary of the discipleship pathway, and every single follower of Jesus is somewhere on this pathway. We're either at the beginning of faith, new to the faith, or we're mature in the faith, or we're somewhere in the middle, young or growing in our faith. We're all somewhere on this discipleship pathway if we've chosen to follow Jesus. But notice what undergirds it. Being with Jesus undergirds the discipleship pathway. The fundamental practice that moves us through the stages of spiritual growth on this discipleship pathway is being with Jesus. From very beginning to the very end, that is the key. And the more we arrange our life to be with him, the more we're going to grow to be like him. And that's really the goal of spiritual growth. The goal of discipleship is to become like Jesus. A disciple is somebody who has arranged their life to be with Jesus in order to become like Jesus. That's what a disciple is. And so as we move through these stages, we're increasingly becoming like Jesus. And when we arrive at mature faith and we're mature in the faith, we're significantly, substantially like Jesus. Not perfect, right? We still have growth to do. We still have vices maybe to put off and virtues to cultivate. We still have growth to do, but there is a significant overlap between our life and Jesus' life. And when we say we're like Jesus, what that means essentially is in our character and in the mission of our life, we overlap with Jesus. We're like Jesus, right? Like the character of our life is like Jesus' character. The mission of our life, it reflects the mission of Jesus. And so we're substantially and significantly like him. And that's what it means to grow spiritually. That's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. We're walking this path to becoming like Jesus. And being with him is the primary thing that Jesus uses to transform our life. And the key spiritual practice that helps us be with him is reading our Bible and praying consistently and regularly. As with all spiritual practices, whether it's worship, whether it's service, whether it's fasting, or whatever spiritual practice we want to put into place, one of the primary objectives of any spiritual practice, any spiritual discipline, is to carve out space in our life for God, so that there's room for God in our life, so that God can come and be with us and we can be with him. That's one of the primary objectives of any and all spiritual practices, is to create space in our day, space in our life to be with God. And so the same is true with reading the Bible and praying. So why should you read your Bible and pray regularly? Well, it's not just because your pastor says so. It's not just because the church says so. It's not just because, well, it's kind of a good idea. It's because you're made to be with God. You're made to be rooted in him. You're made to abide in Jesus. You're made for a relationship with him. You were designed for that from the very beginning. And what sin did was, it ripped you out of that connection from God. Sin severed your attachment to God. And what God is doing in Jesus is reconnecting us to himself so that we can increasingly become like Jesus. And so one of the main reasons you need to read your Bible and pray regularly is to create space in your day, space in your life to be with Jesus. And in being with Jesus, you will increasingly become like Jesus as his disciple. And in the next video, I'm going to give you 3 keys for being consistent in this practice of reading your Bible and praying.